Welcome everybody, it's Spessy, and we've got an Azurite C card review, about 10 new revealed cards to look at. We're about 40 days away from the release of Azurite C, slightly more, which means that we're really going to be ramping up the amount of reveals that we see very soon. I do want to give a shout out to Card Market, who sponsor the channel. It's the best place to buy your singles online in Europe. As well as mention, I do have a new Metafy groups feature. I also offer coaching via Metafy. So if you guys are looking to get some personalized decks, some personal coaching from me, as well as access to a private Discord channel where we're going to talk all things Lorcana, this is the best place to do it. As well as mentioning, there's a competition this week where if you guys sign up this week for my Metafy groups, it helps me rise up the leaderboard and I get quite a bit of extra cash if I do well in terms of supporters. So thanks everyone for all the continued support. Let's take a look at these new cards then from Azurite C. Starting off with a 1-cost inkable Nick Wilde. It's a Sapphire common card with 1 strength and 2 willpower. The Soggy Fox. Nice to have a partner. While you have another character with support in play, this character gets +2 strength. It quests for 1 and the flavor text, glad you could make it. So we've seen quite a lot of cards already in Sapphire that kind of focus around a support theme, and none of them really are very good. And Nick Wilde continues that trend. While this could be a 3-2 character, having said that, so honestly, maybe I underestimated Nick Wilde a little bit there early on. Nick Wilde actually looks okay. I don't think it's going to see any play, but in fairness, if you've got 2 support characters, this guy is a 5-2. So actually, I'm kind of reversing my opinion on Nick here. Nick looks quite good. Nick looks like one of the few Sapphire support cards which actually have a lot of value by playing lots of support characters. The concern is there enough elsewhere? One thing that does actually interest me, funnily enough, with Nick Wilde here is going to be in a Rockstar Stitch deck, which is not something you would usually associate Sapphire with, but Sapphire has started to get some more 1 and 2 cost characters, which are quite good. We got Basil in set 5, which has support as a 2-1. You could play Hey Hey, and then suddenly your Nick Wilde is going to be like a 5-2, which quests for 1. So Nick actually has quite a bit of potential. Definitely doubt that you're still going to build like your whole deck around this kind of support idea. However, Nick does actually look quite good. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a card that you can just put into any old deck. But if you do have enough support for the support, Nick could actually be quite good. And if you've got 4 support characters, this guy's going to be an 11-2. Are you going to have 4 support characters? No. I suppose, interestingly then, if there's a way of giving Nick Wilde support, and you have lots of other support characters, that could actually be a good way of getting like a character of 10 plus strength, which I think it's Wendy, or it's maybe Alice in Wonderland, I think it's an Alice card, a legendary from set 2. So maybe Nick is the card that we've been waiting for. I think there's also a Olaf card, which is like a 3-cost Floodborn Shift type thing, similar to Diablo from set 4, which is obviously not seen any play, but I believe it kind of gives your other characters support, something like that. So there's definitely some synergies in there. Usually Lorcana cards, I know what every one of them does, but these kind of niche Sapphire cards, not so much. But Nick Wilde, the more I look at it, the more I am interested in it. I think what's also worth mentioning before we look at Judy Hopps is the more sets we get, the more likely it is that we'll start to see some Sapphire decks which don't focus on ramp and just have like a lower curve, because we don't tend to get that many low-cost characters each set. But we got Basil last one, that's pretty good. This could also be quite good. And next we got Judy Hopps, the Resourceful Rabbit. It's a rare character in Amber. It has 6 cost and it's inkable, 3 strength, 6 willpower, which quests for 2. It has support, and the ability, fittingly, is need some help. At the end of your turn, you may ready another chosen character of yours. So you can't ready Judy Hopps itself. What's interesting about Judy Hopps is the turn you play them, you're getting instant value. I always quite like cards in Disney Lorcana when you play them and they do something immediately. For example, Clarabelle draws without being able to be interrupted. And in a similar fashion, Judy Hopps is going to come down and she's going to do something the turn that you play her, then you quest of her the next turn, and then she's going to do something again. So she's actually got a lot of potential, I think. 6 cost is quite a lot for a character with 3 strength and 2 lore. No shift or anything like that. Of course, Amber has Just in Time, which is characters which cost 5 or less, so no Just in Time synergy. Being able to ready stuff is definitely quite powerful, though. I mean, what's worth mentioning, for example, in a Amber Ruby deck where you play Gaston, I've talked a lot about the fact that you're able to use Sven to ready Gaston, and Sven is obviously like a one-time use, but with Judy Hopps, you could use Gaston on turn 4, the turn after you play it, get Judy Hopps down, and then as you end your turn, ready Gaston to protect them to get more value out of that card. So I think in a deck which is utilizing Gaston, Judy Hopps has a lot of potential. I think also if you consider the fact that a lot of the characters you want to play in Ruby and Amber decks that cost 6 are uninkable. There's a lot of competition at 6 cost, but all of it's really uninkable. Perdita, you've got Tremaine, Medusa, you've got all sorts really. So I think that Judy Hopps honestly could see some play. Don't hate the look of it. There's obviously some other synergy with readying characters. For example, there's like Christopher Robbins, which whenever this character is ready, you gain 2 lore or something. I don't think that's gonna see play just yet, maybe one day. But Judy Hopps actually looks okay. Support is a good keyword as well. 3 strength for support is not bad at all. 6 willpower, hard to deal with. I actually think it's not a bad card at all. Up next, Rafiki, which very nearly made the thumbnail art. It's a 9 cost uninkable. The Ethereal Guide. It's 6 strength, 6 willpower, which quests for 4. It's a rare and has shift 7. And I don't even know how to pronounce that. Astra Laterment. Astral Attunement. I got there eventually. Astral Attunement. Is that 2 words? I think it might be 2 words. During a turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may draw a card. Now, of course, Rafiki does have some decent shift options already, the most obvious being the 1 cost Rafiki with Challenger, but there is also the 4 cost Rafiki, which has Rush from Shimmering Skies, which hasn't really seen any play, which has kind of surprised me, but this character is very difficult to get down on the board, being 9 cost, shift 7, very, very expensive, but there is massive reward for being able to do so. I think in particular, you're looking at a Amethyst Sapphire deck, where you're going to be putting cards into your inkwell multiple times a turn. For example, you get Rafiki down nice and early because you're ramping with Sapphire. And then if you've got a Fishbone Quill down on the board, whenever you Fishbone Quill something, you draw. You ink something from hand, you draw. You play a 1 jump ahead, you draw. How far I'll go, you're going to play the how far I'll go, put a card into the inkwell, draw off how far I'll go, and draw another card. So there's huge potential with this card in Amethyst Sapphire. However, it is very, very expensive. But if ever there's a deck which can afford to have expensive cards, of course, it's going to be one that is in Sapphire. So I think Rafiki has some serious potential because not only is its ability very, very powerful, in a similar fashion, it also can do something the turn you play it. If, let's say, you start with 7 ink and then you shift in Rafiki, you ink for turn, you use your Fishbone Quill, it's going to draw you 2 cards and it can quest for 4 instantly. And the fact that the 1 cost Rafiki is actually a pretty good card in its own right helps a lot. It's not a card you particularly want to quest with, so you can just chill with the 1 cost Rafiki on the board, use it to challenge something if you wish, and then if not, suddenly shift 7, which with Sapphire is very achievable, you're drawing an abundance of cards. I think this card is really, really exciting, and I'm actually looking forward to it a lot. My gut feeling is it might be a wee bit too expensive, being 9 cost uninkable. I'm not sure how often you're going to be able to shift it, not sure how many shift Rafiki cards you're going to want to play. Having said that, it's definitely a card that's going to be worth testing, and it's a great artwork as well. Really, really powerful card, just very expensive. Wendy Darling, another rare, this one in Ruby. 2 cost uninkable. The Courageous Captain, 1 strength, 2 willpower. Has the Pirate and Captain tags, hero as well. But Pirate and Captain, you can expect to get quite a bit of support this set. Of course, we know Mr. Smee has that Captain synergy. There's some Pirate synergy potentially, but Azurite Sea being the theme of Pirates and Captains, you would imagine there's going to be some synergy here. And speaking of synergy, look, this has some. It's evasive, quest for 1, look lively crew. While you have another Pirate character in play, this character gets +1 strength and +1 willpower. So it could be a 2/2 evasive, which quests for 2. Very, very good. Evasive, which quests for 2 on turn number 2 is extraordinary. What's also worth mentioning, you can play Wendy on turn 2, and then on turn 3, you play a Pirate character like a John Silver, for example. So maybe in a location deck, a Ruby Steel location deck. Ruby Steel locations have just got a top 64 finish at Disney Lorcana Challenge in Las Vegas. And this seems like a card which could slot into that kind of deck. Jim Hawkins, John Silver, A Whole New World. You could even play the Jolly Roger to give Wendy Darling Rush, although I'm not convinced that's something you're going to be too interested in doing. It is uninkable, of course. That is very, very important. And for that reason, I don't think it's tremendous. It's certainly not a card that's going to see play in many Ruby decks, but hopefully it's enough support for a Ruby deck focusing on Pirates and Captains, Ruby Steel being the obvious option. I think this card actually has a lot of potential. I really, really do. A card which has Evasive and Quest for 2 that you can play on turn 2 is no joke. That is really, really powerful. And I don't think the condition is going to be hard to meet in the deck which you would play this card. The bigger question is the deck you play this card in going to be good? Because the card in its own right looks good in that specific deck. The bigger question really is, how good will an all-out pirate deck actually be? I think it might be good. I think that we're probably going to get enough support this set for one. A lot of the time when I see kind of theme decks, you know, for example, like a Madrigal deck, it's like, yeah, that's not very good. The cards in their own right aren't that good, and there probably isn't enough support. But this looks good. There's already quite a few pirates in the game, and we're going to get more. So I have a good feeling about Wendy Darling, the Courageous Captain. Next, we've got a Chip and Dale Shift card. In the previous video where we were looking at the original Azurite C reveals, there's already 4 Chip and Dale cards that we've got. And this is similar to Flotsam and Jetsam in that it can shift onto either Chip or Dale in the way that Flotsam and Jetsam can shift onto Flotsam and Jetsam. Of course, you can also shift onto Morph, so never forget about old Morph. All of the Chip and Dale cards are in Amber so far as well, so you're going to have some flexibility on what color you pair Amber with to play this card. 6/6 stat line, quest for 3, and it's a shift 5. Search and rescue during your turn. Whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may return a character card from your discard to your hand. So that's pretty powerful. The thing is, it's very expensive, but of course, if you're shifting, it's not too bad at all. And some of the other Chip and Dale cards that we already saw are not that bad at all in Amber builds. And in particular with Chernabog, one of the Chip and Dale cards, when you play it, you like put a bunch of cards into your discard pile. So there's definitely the potential of playing these kinds of cards in a Mufasa deck. Of course, if you're playing Morph as well, if you're playing Emerald, then a Emerald Mufasa build could be an interesting option as well. And it's not like you have to play it with Mufasa. It's just generally we tend to see these kinds of cards go down that route with things like Gaston, maybe the Judy Hopps, those kind of things, because Gaston's also going to help you actually pay this 8 cost. I mean, the other thing to consider in a Mufasa build is there's so much competition for uninkable expensive cards. Cards like Wreck-It Ralph, if you go for Ruby, like you usually do, things like Scar, Medusa, Sisu, all sorts of very, very heavy competition. So the fact it's uninkable is definitely a shame, but being able to put cards from your discard into your hand is good. And of course, if you want to play Amber Sapphire, that's where this card might actually be best. Amber Sapphire is definitely the weakest color combination in Disney Lorcana right now, by a distance, I would say. So it would be really nice to see Amber Sapphire finally getting a bit of juice. Is Chip and Dale, the Recovery Rangers, the card for that? During your turn, whenever a card is put in your inkwell, you may return a character card from your discard to your hand. If it was any card, being able to like pull Porpsicles back, that kind of thing, it would be more interesting or better. But there's obviously worth considering in a Amber Emerald deck with the Queen, being able to put the Mirabelle Madrigal back into your hand. It's not terrible. I don't have the highest hopes for it, though. It just seems a bit too expensive. And, yeah, I don't think it's going to be very good. But I'm certainly excited to try it out. And it is going to be a fun one, no doubt about it. So far, 4 Chip and Dale cards, so quite a lot of shift options. If we get more, maybe it becomes even more appealing. It's probably just going to be a more for fun card, though, than a competitive one. But that's fine. Not every card can be competitive. Not every card can be competitive, but this one certainly is. It's Yokai, the Enigmatic Inventor. It's a 4-cost inkable uncommon in Sapphire. So it's going to be very easy to get this in your packs. 3 stat line quest for 2. So far, not all that impressive, but worth mentioning. 4 cost characters in Sapphire are going to be really combining well with Tipo and combining well as well with One Jump Ahead, because you can play it on turn 3. Whenever this character quests, you may return one of your items to your hand to pay 2 ink less for the next item you play this turn. What? That is a very powerful ability. Time to upgrade indeed. It's also got the inventor tag. Inventors are kind of the other main tag, which seems to be getting a lot of support with Azurite Sea, Inventor, Captain Pirate. This card's very, very good. Now, I actually spoke to Jan Moy and Kawa from the Podkana podcast about this when I saw them a few days ago. And Jan doesn't think this card is going to be good enough to see play in Ruby Sapphire because you have things like Grammatala, which, you know, and obviously the Ruby Sapphire decks just have to have so much top end that it's going to be quite difficult to fit this in. I argue it might make the cut, but who knows? If you were to add it in, I don't think you would replace Grammatala. Rather, you would probably play it alongside Grammatala, have a lower curve overall, but have more card draw options. However, in a deck like Sapphire Steel, that is where this card is going to absolutely shine, I think. Tipo 1 jump, perhaps, as your options on turn 2. Get Yokai down on turn 3, and then pop the Popsicle for free, quest, put the Popsicle back in your hand, and then play it again for free, or just pay 1 ink for a Fishbone Quill. That, I think, is the best curve, right? So you go Tipo or 1 jump on turn 2, Yokai on turn 3. Obviously, you'd need a Popsicle on turn 1 as well. Pop the Popsicle, quest of Yokai, put the Popsicle back into your hand, play a Fishbone Quill for 1 ink, play the Popsicle again as well. Jobs are good, and you're starting to draw a bunch of cards. You're ramping, and then you go for the whole new world or something like that down the line, and then you're just in a really good position. So I think Yokai is really, really good support for Sapphire Steel, which I think is great, because I think Sapphire Steel did fall off a little bit, certainly in terms of popularity, with the release of Shimmering Skies, although it did just get a top 8 finish in Vegas. It's definitely an underrated deck, but this does seem like a card which is going to fit best in Sapphire Steel and looks very, very good. Having said that, I also think that this is the kind of card which would help enable a deck like Amber Sapphire, perhaps, to perform a little bit better, as it's quite a low curve card. So I would say the Sapphire decks which have a slightly lower curve. Interestingly, Amethyst Sapphire hasn't played any items just yet. I don't think Yokai will change that necessarily, although it might. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing to not play Flavisham in a Sapphire deck, but the Sapphire Amethyst decks that are seeing competitive play haven't been doing that. Is this maybe enough to tip that in the other direction? I'm not sure. This card just looks very good. We know how good Tipo is. It quests for 2. I think that's like the other really important thing to mention. It's got the same stat line as Tala, but it quests for 1 extra, which is a really big deal. It quests for twice as much, right? I think this card's very, 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 very good. One of the best cards we've had revealed so far, and you can certainly expect it to see a lot of competitive play. Up next, we have a racer. None of the racers have really done too well in set 4. This one is the Adora Beazle Winter Pop. What a name. The Ice Rocket Racer. It's a common Ruby card, which costs 3, and it is inkable. 1/5 stat line, which quests for 1. When this character has damage, she gets +1 lore. So this card just doesn't seem great, does it? It'll take more than a knock. It will take more than that to knock me out of the race. Getting damage is not exactly an easy condition to meet. Like, how are you going to get damage on Adora Beazle Winterpop? Are you going to challenge something with her to then get like a damage on it? But yeah, it just doesn't look very good, does it? 1/5, which can quest for 2 if it's a 1/4. Would you really care about a 1/4 card, which could quest for 2? Not really. You know, like the vanilla Mickey Mouse from set 1 is a 3/3 which quests for 2. So like a 1/4 which quests for 2, a conditional 1/4 that quests for 2 is really not impressive in the slightest. I think this card is really, really bad. Really, really bad is actually a little bit harsh, but it's just not good at all. Obviously, you could use like Teeth and Ambitions on it, but then you're using like, it's just not worth the setup, right? Like if this character gets its maximum value, it's fine, slightly below average. And then when it doesn't have the condition, it's just very, very poor. So I don't think there's a world where this card is ever seeing any play. It is a hero. Mr. Smee, the Steadfast Mate. It's a 2-cost inkable. Mr. Smee, 3 strength, but only 2 willpower. Okay. Mr. Smee. Not quite as good as the other Mr. Smee, that's for sure. It's a pirate. It quests for 1. And the good catch ability during a turn, this character gains evasive. Captain Hook, like a word with ya. So, in other words, it's Jafar in steel, but now it's a Mr. Smee. Now, why on earth are they printing the same card with a different name, you might ask? Well, maybe we're getting a Mr. Smee shift, a Floodborn Smee. It seems like the set for it, doesn't it? Azurite C being pirates and captains, Mr. Smee being obviously a very well-known character. So I think we can probably anticipate that we're going to be getting a Floodborn Mr. Smee, which would be really exciting. But of course, the other Mr. Smee is one of the best cards in the game, and this one is considerably worse. Although a 3/2 evasive is fine, but again, this card already exists in steel as Jafar with the exact same stat line. It's just got different tags and a different name. So could see play if there's a really good Mr. Smee shift option, but other than that, don't expect it to see any. Captain Hook, the Underhanded. It's a 3-cost inkable rare card in Emerald with a 1/4 stat line, which quests for 2. So this is kind of, if we go back to the Adora Bizzle Winter Pop, I was saying like a 1/4, which quests for 2, wouldn't be that impressive. Well, that is exactly what Captain Hook does. So we're going to need a decent ability. And if this card has a good ability, then we're very impressed. So it's got the pirate and captain tags. Inspires dread. While this character is exerted, opposing pirate characters can't quest. And whenever this character is challenged, draw a card. Well, I said we needed a pretty impressive ability. I have to say the upper hand ability is pretty impressive. While this character is exerted, opposing pirate characters can't quest. Very niche. Not really going to be very relevant very often. Having said that, we are getting a lot of pirates. Obviously, if there's a very popular pirate deck, then that could be relevant. But you can always just pretend that part of the ability doesn't exist and just look at the upper hand ability whenever this character is challenged, draw a card. That's good. That is just decent. Especially, again, if we get some more Floodborn Captain Hooks, which I would imagine we probably do. Again, this is probably the set for it. There is that Steel Captain Hook from set 1, which is unfortunately uninkable, which means it's probably not going to be quite good enough to play. But this card has a lot of potential for me. 1/4 stat line, which quests for 2, is actually not bad. Even though I was saying, below average, it's got more than that, right? It's a below average ability, like stat line with a good ability, which makes it actually a pretty good card. I like this one quite a bit. I think it will see some play, especially if there's a good Floodborn Captain Hooks and more Pirate Captain synergy, right? I think it's pretty decent. Smee on 2, Captain Hook on 3. Smee doesn't take damage. That sounds pretty tasty. Peter Pan, Neverland Prankster. It's a super rare, 7-cost inkable with a 4/6 stat line, which quests for 1. Look innocent. This character enters play exerted. Now, obviously, that could be construed a downside usually. However, the ability Can't Take a Joke makes use of the fact that it's exerted instantly. While this character is exerted, each opposing player can't gain lore unless one of their characters has challenged this turn. Now, I think this card is pretty terrible, I have to be honest. However, what is worth mentioning is that this card is preventing your opponent from gaining lore, which includes locations. So, for example, you play Peter Pan down, your opponent has a Queen's Castle. Let's say they have 7 Queen's Castles on the board. They're about to get 14 lore, which of course would never happen. But let's just say hypothetically that is what's happening. Well, Peter Pan is going to stop all of those Queen's Castles gaining any lore. Even if they then challenge, it's too late for locations. So it's very good against locations. The problem is, even though being able to stop your opponent gain lore inherently is quite powerful, it's not doing it permanently, because all they have to do is just challenge with one of their characters and then everything else can quest. So I'm not really convinced by this one. If it had better stats elsewhere and it was cheaper, I would be pretty interested. But I don't know. Honestly, the best idea for Peter Pan, in a weird way, seems like the Green Hades legendary from set 4. Because you banish a card named Peter Pan that's cheaper to play this Peter Pan on top. And usually when you use that Hades, you're not shifting, so the cards can't quest or anything instantly. But the fact that Peter Pan could then enter play exerted, I doubt that the Hades stuff is going to be good though, right? The Hades card is just pretty bad overall. That's one use case though for it, the fact that it enters play exerted. If you can get it down quickly, maybe in like an Amber Emerald deck or a Emerald Sapphire deck, there's potential. I don't really see it though, honestly. I don't really see it at all. Maui also removes this and stays on the board. I think that's a big problem. If I had like a 5/7 stat line where if Maui was going to challenge it, Maui would be removed from the board and Peter Pan would stick around, I'd be a little bit more impressed by it. But I don't think it's a very good card. I will say I think that it's an intentional decision for a card with an ability like this for the devs not to make it too good, because I think a card which can stop opponents gaining lore could be quite, well, it could be incredibly powerful with the right stat line, but I don't think this one is very good. Pixie Dust up next. It's a 4-cost uninkable item in Amethyst, Faith and Trust. You can exert it and spend 2 ink. Chosen character gains Challenger 2 and Evasive until the start of your next turn. Now, this card is not very good on its own, but what I will say is if you can get the right synergies in there with things like Scrooge McDuck, which can play items for free, if you can get synergies in there with things like Magicka Dispel, which is an Amethyst card, which can quest and select an item and gain lore equal to that item's cost, that's where this card could see some play. I very much doubt it will see play. I do think the ability is very powerful, though. Gaining Evasive until the start of your next turn is very, very good. When I spoke to Moyen about this card, I quite liked it at first. I was like, it's not that bad. At least it's got quite unique. It's got some use cases. He did point out Maui's Fishhook could do something very similar, which is 3-cost and inkable. So it's basically a worse version of Maui's Fishhook, but perhaps in a ink color which can have more synergies with it, with the fact that, again, like Magicka Dispel could be an option. It's probably not going to see any play, but honestly, if it was inkable, I'd be pretty excited about it. That is all the cards we've got. So big shout out to Mushu Report, who put all these together. What I did want to quickly do is just go through kind of some of the other cards which were revealed earlier in the set very quickly, just to give you guys a reminder, because it has been a bit of a while. There was some cards which were kind of revealed in a weird way like this here. Oops. Uh-oh, it's all gone a bit wrong. Ah! I'm not editing. I refuse. Shout out again to Card Market for sponsoring the video. So there's a few cards kind of revealed like this. This was in the D23 panel, where we kind of don't know the full cards, but you can see we've got a Minnie Mouse Pirate card, a Daisy Duck Pirate Captain. We've got a Goofy Shipwright. We've got a Minnie Mouse Pirate Lookout, a Goofy Expert Shipwright, and a Mickey Mouse Pirate Captain. So because we can't see the full stats on the card, I don't want to talk about those too much. Donald Duck First Mate. When you have a captain character in play, this character gets +2 lore. Questing for 3 is very, very good, so that's a card to keep an eye on. And then these are the other cards which we looked at in the previous video. This Honey Lemon card I'm really excited about. I think this is a really, really good card, as is Fred. Baymax there. Chip, I wanted to look at the Chip and Dale cards to kind of assess the Chip and Dale Floodborn a little bit better. So Chip Ranger Leader, 3/4, quest for 2. When you have a character named Dale and play, this character gains support. I don't think this one's particularly good, to be honest with you. Dale, when you play this character, you may put the top 3 cards of your deck into your discard to give chosen character -3 until the start of your next turn. Now, this one I'm interested in. This card does have some potential. Unfortunately, its stats are not impressive at 3/4 questing for 1. 3/4 quest for 1 is below par stat line, I would say. It's not terrible, though. If it was like a 4/4, I'd feel a little bit better about it. But if you compare it to like Grandma Tala, for example, and the other Sapphire card we were looking at, which is a 3/3, which quest for 2, it's got 1 strength more than Grandma Tala, and its ability is not that great overall. But definitely some big Chernobog synergy in there, maybe like some Revive synergy. Hopefully, it does seem like Amber is starting to have a bit more of a theme of having some discard interaction as well. With obviously the Shift Chip and Dale card, you're putting cards from your discard back into your hand. So definitely want to keep an eye on this Dale card. I think there's a couple more as well. Dale, Friend in Need. This character enters play exerted unless you have a character named Chip in play. It's a 3/4, which quest for 2. It's 1 willpower more than a vanilla Mickey Mouse, with its ability not really giving you much. So this card's not very good at all. And Chip Friend in Need is a 3/3. When you play this character, chosen character gets +1 all this time. This is the best one of them. This Chip card and this, was it a Chip or was it a Dale? And this Dale card. So there's 1 good Chip card, 1 decent Dale card. Probably not going to be enough for the Floodborn card, but still pretty exciting nonetheless. We might get some more support. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like. Thanks again to Card Market for sponsoring the video. And again, thanks to Mushu Report for stuff. And if you're interested in joining the groups as a supporter, I really appreciate it. If you sign up today, it's helping me in the little competition they have going on. If we can get up to like 20 supporters today, I get like $500 extra, something like that, which would be really, really epic. And I would really appreciate the support. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video. Cheers. I appreciate you guys. Nice one.